asking people, we're asking people to get connected by sharing a little bit about yourself, where you're from, your position, your name, and a strategy that has supported your work with families. And then we're also going to ask, put this in. Vicki, did you disenable my move me of my cursor as well, my changing slides?
I don't think I did, but hold on really quick. You are still co-host, Bev.
I am. For some reason, it's not moving. Ah, we did. It moved now. Don't ask me why, but I'm glad it's working. So the second step of what I'm asking people to do is just to be reflective and to think about what your program is already doing to engage families. And then secondly, to think about what are the needs of your students and your families. So we welcome everybody to our session, Parent Engagement Strategies for Launching into the School Year. And my name is Bev Schumacher. And we are delighted that you are here today. The fact that you are here says that you already are committed to working with families, and we appreciate your taking your busy time in order to join in with us. I am from Milwaukee, Wisconsin. At least that's where I'm residing now. There's been a few moves in my life, but Milwaukee is what we call home. My contact information is right there, and also it is on the handouts that we shared with you. So if you do have questions afterwards or something that we shared or questions, whatever, we would be more than happy to connect with you afterwards. And sharing the screen here with me is Vicki Robinson. Vicki is the person who has put this coordination of the webinar together. I'm honored to call her my partner. I have spent almost 30 years designing a company called Learning Props, and Vicki is starting to take that over as I'm threatening words called retirement. So I will continue to be involved and hope that I can continue to do webinars, but hopefully there will be a different pace to life and we'll have some opportunities to explore some other things. So we are delighted that you are here today. What is so exciting is that we have brought together people from all across the nation. We have people from the East Coast and the South, and we have people in many different positions. We have people who are working in the State Department, as well as we have people who are doing what we would call face-to-face parent engagement by being at the earliest levels of service to families and their children. So it's an exciting group that we have pulled together and that we will be sharing information about what we can do and what we are doing. There are some handouts that Vicki has shared, and if you didn't get them, just shout out to Vicki, let her know that you need them, and she will be sure to get them to you, and it might be after our webinar today. But there's really about 4 pages to what we're sharing. There's 2 pages that are handouts that are specific to the PowerPoint slides I will be sharing. And then there are 2 pieces that are a handout that would be suitable to share with families an activity about washing hands. It was actually designed when I was doing a workshop for the state of Alabama, and we wanted to show them how we could do an activity for families that cross different lines and disciplines and concepts. And the other is the directions how to do that. I've never done a mini folded book on virtual, so you're going to be my experiment today to see how that actually works, but I'm sure somehow we will manage it really well. So look for those handouts that we have shared. My name is Bev Schumacher again, and I started my career in the field of education, and then the opportunity that really changed the direction of where my life was going and the kind of work I did was being a parent involvement coordinator. I had the privilege of doing that for about 10 years. And then along with the other curves and the corners that life has taken, it has brought me to where I am today, where I have started a company and I've written about family engagement, and I do presentations whenever I can across the nation to help share my passion about the importance of partnering with families. So that's a little bit about who I am. And as the session goes on, please do share your contact information. If there's someone else doing a parallel position to you, please reach out to each other, because some of the best ideas that I have learned have come from other professionals who are doing this work and doing it well. So whether you are returning to school, or school is about to start, or school has already started, There are other people who are just kind of rolling along that they maybe didn't even have the summer break that many people in a traditional education setting get to experience. So we're all coming from different positions and places of what we do. But there's one thing I think we can all unite around, and that is the idea that children's learning is important and that we have a role in nurturing that, but it is not our job to carry solo. It's a job that we will do much better when we embrace parents as partners in doing that job. We want children to learn. We also want children to become active citizens of the world and add to the world and improve upon it. So the learning objective that I would really like for you to have today is to reflect and consider how to embrace parents as partners. In doing that, I first ask you to think about what is your mission or vision statement. It outlines and defines a school's programs, the values the program has, the objectives that it has, and it helps to set the course for the kind of services that are delivered. My question to you is, does your vision embrace families? When I was thinking about, well, I should share some really great examples of some mission statements, I was kind of searching around the internet, and what I stumbled across was a site that is specific to helping programs decide what their vision or mission statement should be. So I thought, oh, I will just share the whole site. And then I thought, but I need to put a few things out there to discuss. So I picked the top 3 things that were shared on that site. One of the interesting things about mission statements is I've done trainings. I will say to people on the staff, what is your mission statement or what is your vision? And sometimes they kind of stumble and stutter and they go, well, it has something to do with. So they get to be very long sometimes. And some mission statements are so complex that there's not a comma or a period in a paragraph long sentence that even allows you to stop and take a breath. So we have to make sure that, number one, that our mission does focus on what's important. And I will point out to you that these first 3 statements that I gathered off of this site don't make mention of partnering with families or connecting with families. So that's one thing that I would say, they need to consider what their statement is in their position in regards to the full life of the child and who they're working with. But what we really need to determine is that, yes, we do need to have that direction. We do need to have those policy statements. We do need to share them with families, and very often they're shared in information such as what's posted online, in a policy book. But at the same time that we share those broad definitions and objectives, we have to also say it needs to be clear, simple, and memorable to families. In other words, intentional and purposeful. Those are 2 words that I put on a slip of paper and I attached to my computer sometime much earlier in the year. And I will tell you that I look very often back at those 2 words saying, is what we're doing have purpose? Is what we're doing intentionally focused? So consider where your position is with your mission statement and decide, is this something that our program has to make clear? In terms of keeping it clear, simple, and memorable to families, it might be better as a short phrase. So think about what that might be. When I started working in the program that set the course for where I was going with family engagement, it was the start of a state pre-K program. And the intention was to give good education to children. But the intention was also that we were going to do just as well with the families and empower the families to support learning as we were focused on the children. And somewhere along the way, I started saying, well, it's what you do and what we do at school that works together to help your child learn. And eventually it became the simple school plus home equals learning. So that is something that I have shared over and over again. And even as I do presentations, I use that phrase. But your short statement could be working together to, and then you pick which word fits in there. Where every child has opportunity. Finish the statement with what it is. But when parents come and you repeat that short, objective statement to them over and over again, it allows you to buy into what they're doing and they to buy in with what you're doing. So keep it simple, clear, and memorable. Asking you a question. Why would a restaurant share a menu? I'm going to ask you to enter your thoughts into the chat. Again, why would a restaurant share a menu? So reflect on your thoughts, and while you're entering those ideas into the chat, I'm going to go ahead and share a couple slides here. As I was putting the session together, I had just recently been on a training where they showed a short YouTube movie or video. And I went, wow, that really was so clear and it made it such an easy discussion. I thought maybe that's where I should begin. And so I set about finding a short video from YouTube that I thought would really say a lot. And I found beautiful things out there on YouTube, but none of them seem to be broad. They all seem to be with a specific purpose or a specific intent of what they were doing. So even though I liked them, I'm not going to show them to you, but I thought I need to share this list with you because maybe you can go on this adventure and look at some of these sites and say, would this be a starting place for my staff to have a conversation about engaging families? So it is listed on your handout, so you can search them out and see if these might be helpful to you. There are many great conversations happening across the nation talking about working with families. And yet, although this conversation is rich and is out there and it is being bought into, it still remains a need. Matter of fact, it's kind of exciting. The US Department of Education has actually added a committee that's looking at family engagement. So the conversations are happening, but there's work to be done. Another place for you to go is statewide family engagement centers. The map that you see on your screen, the states that are darker that have the stars in them are the ones that have these state family engagement centers. This was a national competition. States applied for it, states were accepted. It is now going back to the rebid process, and there could be a new group of states that receive funding, or some of the ongoing programs may continue their work. That remains to be seen. But if your state is one of them that is starred, find out what's happening in your state. And if your state is not one of them starred, take a look at one of the neighboring states that does have a family engagement center and find out what they're doing statewide to engage families. So take a look at what is being done, but know that each one of these centers, when they were enabled with the grants to do the work that they were doing, had to make a commitment that everything they were doing is free and available to anyone who needs it. So whether you live in South Dakota or not, you can find out the great work South Dakota is doing, or what's happening in Kentucky, or what's happening in Arizona. So do check those out. There's also a national association called NAFSCE, National Association for Family, School, and Community Engagement. Please do check out the work that they are doing as well, and some of the conversations that they have started. So great work being done. And that can be helpful to each of you in your states and your programs. Going back to the idea of a menu, Vicki, what did they say? Why have a menu?
Oh, I have some really good answers here. I have plan ahead for allergies, options, hours of operation, so you know what's available, to provide choices available so customers can choose their choice of food. Let's see, to show their offerings, to show caloric intake. Let's see, really good ones here. To present available options for you to choose from what you prefer.
They did it better than me. I put those 4 bullets there in case there wasn't a rich conversation, but you guys are on target. Exactly. We would have a hard time going to a restaurant that didn't give us choices. What do I ask for? What are you serving? Do you have the ingredients if I ask for this that you can serve me? So there's a real purpose for having a menu, for having a plan, for having a strategy of how they're going to serve. And my emphasis is that that is what we need to do for our programs as well, that when families walk in, we can let them know what we offer, what we expect, what we're able to deliver. So think about how you could display a menu like that. How would you invite families to participate in your program? How do you invite them to support learning at home? Those are two key things we're going to talk about today. And how is your menu shared? You might say, oh, well, we always have. Well, if you know you always have, how do you let the families know that, hey, during the year, these are 5 things I want you to join us for, or 5 things for you to plan to participate in. So we need to figure out what our menu is and what can go out there on that menu. I had the opportunity back in 2003 with a group called the Southern Early Childhood Association. Great things were happening in Kentucky. We had family resource centers. We had this early childhood initiative that was going, that was not being done in every state. And we were talking about family engagement. And they said, tell us what you're doing up there, and how can other states do that in other programs. So I had the opportunity to co-author with Dr. Paul Wirtz, who was at Eastern Kentucky University and eventually at Northern Kentucky University. And together we penciled out ideas about how we can work with families. Well, fast forward a few years, the material was getting dated. And in 2020, thanks to COVID, I found myself with a little bit more time on my calendar than I had anticipated. And I said, it's time, and went about republishing it, expanding it, enriching it, clarifying some things that had changed over the period of time. So on the menu, we came up with 5 different ideas. The 2 in red are the ones we're going to emphasize today, and that is sharing information with parents and families and supporting learning at home. But the other 3 things that could be potential workshops for some other days are welcoming parents and families, involving parents and families in the program, and working within the community. So those are other topics that you certainly should not overlook, but your menu needs to be broad. And there is no one size fits all. What works for your program might not work for the program that's next door to you. Every program is unique, but even within program, the staff are unique, families are unique. The needs of families that they have might be unique from other programs. So we need to continually look back to our audience and to say, what is it that they need? I asked this question, parent or partners, what is the difference? So I'm asking you to use the letters in the word parents to spell the word partners. So I've helped you out there. I've put the word parents and I've paired them up, but we can't spell the word partner unless we get one more letter, and that's the letter R. So working with families is about building relationships. The difference between a parent and a partner is you are. When I'm doing a training and people say, well, but parents aren't coming, parents aren't, I always ask the question to them, what are you doing to change that? How are you making them feel welcome? How are you inviting them? How are you building relationships? So it comes back to how you are interacting with these families. Let me clarify 2 definitions. One of them is the word parents versus families. We're really talking about the same group. Matter of fact, when I have to do something in writing, I try to go parent, family, and rotate the words back and forth. Who I'm really talking about are the stakeholders, the people who are important in that youngster's life that are going to make the difference in their learning and in their assimilation into being a citizen of the community. So think of it how you like, but if I say the word parent, I'm not just thinking of biological people, I'm thinking about that whole group of support that they have. And it might be someone not directly related to them who is that support person. I'm also going to talk about the word involvement and engagement. About 50 years ago, I started to be involved with this guy, and I kind of liked him, and the relationship kind of went from one step to the next. But it wasn't until I had an engagement ring on my finger that there was a deeper commitment between us as to what a relationship was going to be. That's the same use of words that's being used in parent involvement, versus parent engagement or family engagement. They are similar in thinking, but there's a deeper connectiveness to the word engagement, and that has been the way this field has swung to using that terminology. Families pay attention to the information that is specific to their child. Sure, they care about the whole school. Sure, they care about what the whole classroom is working on. But the bottom line is their most concern is about their specific student. So try to tie families in to how is your student doing? How is your student achieving? How do we do that? We communicate. Communication is a foundation for all relationships. If you don't stay in communication, the relationship starts to disappear. It needs to be two-way communication. We need to give information, but we also need to get information back. It's the same kind of idea of playing tennis. Great, I can hit the tennis ball, but unless it comes back to me that I can serve it back again, I don't have a tennis game. It's the give and the take, it's the back and the forth. And we're even talking about those conversation exchanges in child development. The importance of children learning vocabulary is so important. And those exchanges back and forth are what makes that happen. Learn the names of every student, of every parent. Make sure that you find out how to pronounce the name so that the family doesn't feel offended. Make sure that you know the other people in that child's circle of support. All of those stakeholders, know who they are. Find out in what way they prefer to get information. You need to send information at least 3 times and in 3 different ways. If a program says, oh, why didn't you come on Friday night? Oh, I didn't know about that. Oh, well, it was in the newsletter. You can't assume that every family embraces that newsletter as the information, or that week that it was shared that they had a chance to read it. So send messages at least 3 times and in 3 different ways. Some ideas to explore for your program. First of all, learn from experiences. Sometimes we learn lessons the hard way. I started doing home visits a few years after I had started working as parent involvement coordinator because my role was pretty much in the building until I needed to do some home visits upon one time. And my success of reaching my families on my first day of home visiting was 0%. 100% of the parents stood me up. And I remember one of the staff members walking out of the lunchroom giggling when I reported my failure that morning. And I said, how do you do this? And so I went, there's got to be a way. And lo and behold, there was a die cut machine in the district and I started making door hangers. And the door hangers served the purpose of saying when I missed a family, hi, I was here. And at first they were just a piece of cardstock. And eventually I went to what I call the carbon style. So instead, the message was written on this page. The top cover gave a little protection so that other people walking past the family's door didn't have a chance to read it. But the back was a carbon copy. So I could take that back and put it in my folder. And the next conversation I had with a family, I could connect with them and I could communicate with them about that missed opportunity. Once we got the relationship established, they didn't stand me up. But boy, was I desperate the first few weeks to figure out, how am I going to do this? Home visits are a wonderful way to get to know the family because instead of making the parent feel nervous coming into you, you're nervous going into their home. Introduce yourself, emphasize the partnerships that you're going to have, share information with them, but also gather information. Make sure that they know why you're coming and what your purpose is, and understand what the mission of your work is about. If you can't do a home visit, phone introductions do work as well. Not as much personal connectiveness, but at least it's a connection that's starting that relationship building. Listen more and talk less. You have 2 ears and 1 mouth, and you would be very wise if you asked them in that proportion. What kinds of information does that parent know about this youngster that you don't know? And they can help you learn that information. How does your child feel about going to school? The question how is such a beautiful question because it lets them share their perspective. Another key word to use is with. We want to work with you. We look forward to working together. Use that word with and how, and I guarantee your relationships will grow stronger. I received some information this week about a program talking about their questionnaire to invite families. And I thought, hey, that sounds interesting. If any of you would like for me to share that copy of that questions, if you do not have a parent questionnaire to gather information, I'd sure be glad to share it. But it was 7 pages long, and I just kind of smiled and went, a lot of the parents I worked with wouldn't be filling that whole thing out. Build relationships. If there is an issue, and issues come up in every relationship, follow up. Find out if what you've done to correct the problem has resolved it on both sides. Post-it notes, best friend in the whole wide world. In other words, if you did something, make yourself a note and put it on your calendar. This needs to be followed up on this week. Give it a week, give it 2 weeks, whatever you decide your time frame should be, but then make sure that every one of those notes gets followed up on. Share caring statements. It's the kind of statements we give to our families all the time. I love you, I care for you, be safe, make smart decisions. Things we tell our kids from the time they're infants until they go into higher levels. But share those caring statements with families as well. Let them know that you value them and that you are there to be a team to work together for the child. Some other ideas, get pictures of the child and family. If nothing else, it really helps a child who's struggling at school to say, hey, I got a picture about your family, and show them the picture and talk with the child about that. Use family names in your conversations to let them know that their family loves them, but that you really care for them too, and you're working together. One of the classrooms that I worked with did a fingerprint stationery. So each child's fingerprint on the lower left corner of your slide was a child's fingerprint with the child's name. And then when the teacher wrote a note, it had personal connection because, hey, here was my child's fingerprint on there. Drawback, you get a classroom change, you've got to make new stationery. What if we find out that a child's mother is having a birthday, or that grandma is having a special birthday celebration? If you allow the child to make a card for them, that helps in building a relationship as well. A principal I worked with did postcards. What she had each student do was to draw a picture, and then she got to take those postcards, and then that gave her the information to be able to write a personal note to each student in her program. Think about how teachers could do that as well. If the child drew the picture, it has a whole lot more meaning, but you must invite the child to draw the picture. Sometimes they draw it and they won't share it with you. So figure out the best system for doing that. Display signage that gives direction to navigate your program. During COVID, a local school here established a hug and go zone. In other words, drop them off and then keep going. Don't park here, keep going. Pair parents together with other families so that when they come to an event, they have someone to kind of talk to and to start to get acquainted with each other. Put your staff in position to welcome families or have volunteers, other parents come in and help you with that volunteerism. If you're putting a welcome sign out at the beginning of the year, make sure that you offer that in every language, so every person feels welcome. And if you don't have a welcome sign or a welcome place, I welcome you to take a piece of chalk. As long as you don't get rain that day, you can write a welcome message by the front door to make it perfectly clear to families that you embrace them and you want them to be there. Have everybody wear name tags so that they know when they come in who's who. I've had parents come to me in the parent center and say, that classroom, which one's the teacher and which one's the aide? I don't know who's who. So I would have pictures of the staff and I would say, hey, this is a teacher and that's the aide in your room, and this is a special helper that's in your room. Have management strategies. Pictures are worth 1,000 words. Take lots of pictures and share them in appropriate ways. Keep records, keep a folder on each child so you can look back and gather information if something comes up and you need that information. Keep a list of all of the students and make sure that you are sending messages. Have you sent a positive message to that family? Have you made a phone call to that family? Have you sought that parent out at an event? And figure out that you really indeed are connecting with each family. Seek out two-way communication. Back and forth notebooks are wonderful, but very time consuming. Think about a folder where you send something home and something is kept at home and something is returned. Do a form so that there is a communication and a place for the parent to give you feedback and send that back again. If you're going to pick up the phone and make a phone call, make sure that you have a plan. Make sure you know why you're calling. Make sure you have an idea on the top of your head for a positive thing to share about their youngster. And if there is some kind of an issue, ask the family for their recommendations, but don't hang up again until you have agreed upon an action or course that you're taking. So what strategies have been effective in your program's communication with families? Enter your thoughts in to the chat and we will collect those ideas a little bit later and share them. And as I said, all ideas shared, we will summarize them and we will send them out for other programs to reap these great ideas that you have. The second topic we want to touch on is supporting learning at home. Even if a family never steps into school, they never come to the events that you host, they don't come in for conferences, they still can be a partner in learning. And this is an important message for all levels of learning. This is for youngsters in the early learning years. These are for kids that are in high school. These are across the board, that if a student needs some support, how do we work together in order to allow that to happen? Research says that about 80% of a child's time is not spent in school. So if I think our program's doing a wonderful job and we have that child 20% of their time in the education system, if we're doing so good with the 20%, think how good we would do if we had tapped into some of that 80% as well. If we had taken other people and helped them to enrich that learning. And if we're not reaching our objectives for a youngster and they're starting to fall behind, how can we tap that other 80% of where their time is spent and make them our partners to work with them, to work together to help them achieve? So that ties into the idea about working with community. There's 3 things that I did a research project on about different levels of supporting learning. The first level of supporting learning is about giving parents an idea, a nudge, an invitation to extend engagement and learning outside of your program. It's our way to communicate with them what we're doing and let them be a part of it. So a simple note on the backpack that says, read me a book, would be a great way to just give that gentle nudge. Now, if I left that message on there every single night and every single week, it would lose its effectiveness. So I need different messages to be able to share. Or what we could do is we could, if you have very young children, you could attach that note to the child's diaper. The last diaper of the day, you could put a sticker on there and you could give them a nudge as to, these are the words to a finger play. This is an activity I want you to do with your child. And I'll tell you from personal experience, those messages do get read and you do get comments and feedback from them. If you don't want to do stickers, you can also do what I call a bag tag. So instead of saying, look in my backpack for papers, you could attach a simple strip by taking a cardstock and just making a message on there and attaching it. It also fits around children's wrists. So that's another place that you can share that message. Same idea. We can use it for functional things, getting immunizations, reminding them about events. But my main emphasis is how do we get those activities that we want them to do at home to be engaged in? And both stickers and those special notes will help us to do those kinds of connections. Other ways of suggestions being shared to families. There are a plethora of text, apps, message systems that are out there. I'm not currently in a classroom situation, so I don't know about those titles. If you have one of those systems that's working for your school, you want to enter that into the chat, please do, because other programs often say, well, what does everyone else use? What's working for you? So enter that information in. At the door messages have to again be intentional and purposeful, have to be thought about long before the first parent arrives at your door, but you have to share a message about, well, on your way home, look for. Maybe it's a color, maybe it's a shape, maybe it's something in the environment that they should be looking for. Ask them to play the I Spy game. I have a story about I Spy game. I was working with a group of parents and it wasn't in an ideal situation. They actually had taken a service vehicle, kind of like a camper, that the motor wasn't working very well and parked it on the parking lot because we needed space. And I got to use that space in order to do some programming with parents once a week. And it was a small group of parents, so it was ample size, but distracting as could be. So I started to say, hey, let's pay. Well, they weren't paying attention to me. And I said, hey, Ridley, gee, I see something you don't see. Worked well. Every parent stopped and they looked at me and they got, what did you say? And so I introduced them to the game of I Spy. It took me 3 weeks before I finally said, okay, I've done it 3 different times in 3 different ways and they're not paying attention. Let's just let it go. But come May, some families reported that that was the one thing that they learned that year. And I thought everybody played that game. But families very often are far removed from their experiences as a child, and giving them a nudge and a reminder is helpful. Share recommendations of places to visit or activities to do. Sometimes they are so busy in their world that they don't have a chance to go and find out about the great thing that's going to happen on Saturday at the library. They need to know like the words or to songs or finger plays that you're doing in an early childhood classroom. At a higher level, they need to know what the spelling words are. When are tests being given? So sharing recommendations isn't just something for these earliest years. It's something that extends throughout. And it has to be specific to what that youngster is doing or learning in the classroom. So best coming from the teacher or someone that's working in a close capacity with the classroom. Give ideas of resources that they have at home that they could use. So recommend that they measure things, but don't assume every family will find a ruler at their home. Give them a strip of paper that has a measuring tool on it, a measuring device. Suggest activities that are everyday common things, whether it's from sorting socks or reading a recipe. Invite families to look at those experiences in a different way and say, hey, these are important skills for your youngster to be working on. At level 2, I recommend that you give families ideas and give them simple props to engage in the learning experience. So I'm giving them the idea, but I'm giving an activity to work with. So there's a home activity page that I had created for a project. And what we did is we made labels. And we said, here are labels that you can stick these stickers on to these different body parts. When I did it and first wrote the directions, I thought they would take the sticker and put it on their child's finger and on their child's thumb and on their fingernail. And lo and behold, they came back with all those stickers stuck on that handout, which worked just fine as well. But when I shared that activity, families distinctly remembered, oh yeah, using all those stickers. And I just smiled and went, yeah, that activity. Some other ways of sharing those simple props to support learning at home. Calendars can be equipped so that there's a different activity to do every day of the week. I've seen them for months, and to me, for the population that I worked with, it was too long. We did far better with doing 1 or 2 weeks of activities instead of anticipating that the family would stick with it for a full month. Provide low cost or disposable items to invite home enrichment. If you have access to a Sizzix or a die cut machine that you can cut out the letter C, letting a youngster hold that letter and look for that letter on the way home is a great way to tune the parent into knowing what their student is working on. Or fall is coming shortly, do a leaf nature walk, pick up a variety of leaves and then send pairs of leaves home. Ask the parents to help their child match the leaves that are similar and talk about what trees they came from, but do give the parents a guide so they know what you're talking about when you talk about the oak leaf versus the maple leaf, because sometimes parents don't have all that information in hand. I'm going to talk about the mini folded book. I've created these mini folded books for so many topics over the years. Either grab that piece of handout that was shared with you, or otherwise just grab any piece of paper that is 8.5 by 11 And I'm going to share that there is a direction sheet. If you're a learner that has to read it and then do it and see it, there's a sheet for you to work with. But otherwise, we're just going to take that piece of paper and we're going to fold it into a book. You're going to begin by taking the book, the paper, and fold it in half the long way, as if this was a hot dog or a Long John donut, whatever your hunger says at this moment. So it's long and skinny. Okay, now you're going to unfold it, refold it. This time you're going to fold it as if it were a hamburger. This time I'm leaving it folded. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring one side up and I'm going to make it come to the top fold. So I've lifted one side of this and I'm flapping it up to the top edge of the fold. Then I'm turning it over and I'm doing the same thing to the other side. When you have it folded twice, you can hold on the middle and you may call them bird wings, whatever you wish to call them, but having everyone hold it to that point, and students can fold these pieces of paper for themselves. And I've had parents come into the parent center and at first they went, oh, what in the world are we doing, huh? And eventually they would say, oh, I know how we did that, and make sure they get to that point. Then what you would do is if you had a scissors, or you can just tear it, you're going to go from the fold down to the crease. So all I've done is cut from the top down to this crease that's in the flap. And then it just kind of droops. What you're going to do is look for the side that says hands, and you just fold it around that. Now, this one was done in an 8.5 by 11. I much prefer this for younger children on the 11 by 17, the larger size paper. But here's your little mini book, and now you have an activity for them to go home with. As long as you ask parents different activities to do that they can do with their youngster, they have the opportunity of 8 pages worth of interactions with their student. The next level we want to talk about is called shared resources to empower families to set learning experiences into action. If I want to read a book, I'll say, oh, I'm going to go get that book. I'm going to go down to the bookstore and I'll get that ordered. Or if I say, let me go to the library. Let me check that book out of the library. I buy it. I have plenty of time to read it whenever I want, whenever it comes in from the order. If I go to the library, I have an expiration time. I've got to be able to finish this within a certain length of time. Which one is going to get you to read the book faster? If you're motivated, maybe having your own book. For me, that deadline really does help. So what we're talking about is sharing resources, both that we can borrow or that we can purchase. So it can go either way. Both directions are perfectly acceptable. What we first did was used a literacy book and we sent it home. And books are a wonderful way to expand language, but books themselves are not fulfilling the developmentally appropriate ideas that we use in the field. So what did we eventually do? We started to add an activity, and we borrowed ideas from classrooms that they said the kids like doing, and we made lots of them, and each classroom has a set of materials that they can loan out. You can use just a clear plastic bag, or you can use a fancier bag. The one that you see in the upper left of your screen is one that was recommended by our public library. They were called hang-up bags, and they're great because they would hang on a shelf, and it was easy to store them if they were hanging up. So what we did is we started to send home the books, and then we added the activity. But over time, we began to see that games were really preferred, whether it was a fishing game, whether it was a card game, whether it was a path game. There seemed to be a stronger use of parents. And how do we find that out? We asked for feedback. We say, how many minutes did you spend on that? We can ask parents, well, did you do it or not? Which is what we did in a research project. How many times did you do it? So you can gather information from the user and say, how did this work? What are your recommendations? But you began to see a correlation between the time the parent working at home and the activity being done. At one time, we actually made activities and we gave them out on the home visits. Very time consuming and lots of materials, but that worked as well. So think about how this is going to work for your population. What kinds of resources does your population have? And I've done workshops and trainings for people in Montessori where there's a different clientele than there is from an at-risk population. But nonetheless, both of them appreciated the materials immensely because it came and it was put in their hands and it was something ready to do. So what you see on the bottom is a game that eventually evolved. What happened is the file folders that we were using, I began to call them the wrinkle crinkled file folders. And even parents would look at me and go, oh no, we don't want to remake that one. That one has 26 parts to it. And so there's this hesitation to share things that has lots of parts. So we tried to find a way to make things durable. And I'm married to a gentleman that was a toy engineer in his first life. So he influenced me greatly on the materials that we kind of designed and created. But we worked with a silk screener in the community and we started putting the games on fabric so that instead of having a wrinkle crinkled file folder, I now had that in fabric. So what we eventually ended up doing was we created 11 different of those games, and each one is set up the same way that they're on fabric. When they're closed, they're the tote bag, but when they're unzipped and opened up, the inside is a game to be experienced. There's a book that goes with it. There's an activity page that goes with it. And the outside pocket has the place to be able to store the dice and the movers, so those parts are easy to be found. And on the back, we could share what was called learning hints and more fun things to do. So activities for the family to take that concept and to dig deeper and to go further with it. And eventually we did them in other languages. So I've done books in Chinese, I've done books in Arabic, and we've done the games in both English and in Spanish. And if that's of interest to you, I'm retiring. You get to talk to Vicki about that. She can share some more information about that if that's something that your program could use in order to invite families to support learning. So some other ideas for supporting learning. Book in a bag. You can start that yourself without needing to purchase from anybody the resources to do. The first time I saw the book in a bag being used was making a supervision visit in Ohio to a toddler classroom. And it was near the end of the day and the students were leaving. And I made the observation that each child came out of the room with their parent. They opened up a bin that was right by the door. They pulled out a book, put it in a bag, handed it to the parent and ran to the door. And about the third person, I figured, oh, this is some kind of a lending program that this teacher is doing. She borrowed the bin of books from the public library, got a new bin of books every month. And she sent them out. At the end of the month, she would return them back to the library for the next set. And I said, do you worry about losing them? And of course, I felt foolish after I'd asked that question after years of doing a lending library and having worked in a public library. I never felt like, oh, if I loan this book to this child, I'm sure it will never come back. It wasn't an idea that ever occurred to me. But at the moment, I did ask her that silly question. She said, no, should I be? I haven't lost any books. Maybe one, she said, over the years I've done it. So it can be as simple as that. It could be a clear backpack. It could be a fabric bag. Whatever you decide will fit the needs of your youngsters. Another approach is to take books and do enrichment. So take a popular book that the children like, but go one step further and give the family some ideas or suggestions in that book so that they can go deeper and experience the concept to a higher level. Or the ones that are on the next part of the slide, these are what I call make and take books. So one has a handle that looks more like a toolbox, and the other one has one that's a pipe cleaner. They're both set up the same way. The bag itself, when it is opened, is a book for the children to write on. When it is closed, the flap from the bag falls down over the top, and there's my simple bag for them to take home. Again, children can fold these, children can make these, or parents coming into a workshop can do them. Notice a smile on the youngster's face when he used a napkin to create a book. So the question is what can you share in a bag? or what maybe have you already shared in a bag that worked? I saw some beautiful kits being used during the COVID time when families were really looking for activities to do. There was a teacher that put together a muffin set. So she put a muffin tin in, she put a box of muffin mix, which is about 40 cents at the store, except I know inflation's making it maybe go up to closer to 50. But that kit was then shared to each family. It was dropped off at the child's home, and each child got to experience making the muffins with the book that related to muffins. And she would then get it back and sanitize the equipment and send it out to the next family to be able to use. But they measured, they talked, they read a recipe, they did lots of things. Another program told me about doing spaghetti night, a family event that they used to host in the program, but during COVID they couldn't. So instead they put together an activity for families to do. They put in the bag that they shared a jar of spaghetti mix, a box of spaghetti, a can of a vegetable, and it was their special treat to the families, which families loved. So think about what you could put in and put it into the chat. Want to also have you think about sharing an effective strategy that you've used to extend learning at home. Enter those into the chat. Vicky's going to give us a report back on some of those. And like I said, we'll share them out to you after the session. While you're doing that, let me talk about where Vicky and I are kind of going. Vicki and I both really understand that when we empower families with resources to use, the chance that they do things are even stronger. And people have looked at my bags over the years and say, oh, well, I can't buy something because I just don't have the budget, but yet they might have a budget to buy a resource material. So what we're hoping to do is to have an opportunity to have a September through May, once a month activity for families to be able to send home specific to the learning level that their youngsters at. So we're looking at a 3-year-old kit and a 4-year-old kit. The one on the upper right is an enhancement of a project that I started being on a committee with United Way in the community that we moved from. And I had the wonderful opportunity to be the solo committee member meeting with 3 principals in order to talk about how we were transitioning the end of the school year into the summer. And they said, oh, we know the early childhood program has to make flashcards. So over the summer, parents practice those flashcards with their children. And my developmentally appropriate antennas went straight up and went, that does not work. We don't do flashcards with preschoolers. So what we did instead is created a game, and we've now kind of aligned that idea and some of the activities with learning standards from many different states. So that might be a solution that might help your program either transition at the end of the school year as you move towards the next school year beginning, or that might be an idea for you to explore. Another thing I'm working on is one called Counting Challenge, and it's an activity that's intended for 4s. It's intended to have them use a scissors, trying to get parents to realize that the use of a scissors is something their youngster needs to master. And the lower one is called Where Will You Find Me? It's one of our learning games. We have chosen 7 of the games that are on the durable fabric direction to offer them in a different option. So these are going to be totally disposable. They're on a card stock and they will get a spinner and fold movers to do it. So remember, there's 3 tiers of supporting learning that I want you to walk away with and say, how can we share suggestions? How can we share suggestions with prompts? And how can we actually share resources? All of them have a value. When I did the research, what we found was that the ideas shared in the suggestion level, 64% of the parents reported that they did those activities. When we got to the shared resources, though, we were up to 84%. So there's a difference between those 2 levels. I'd rather gamble on having more engagement than less. So think about that. Also, when we asked the teachers their responses to the shared suggestions, they gave a not so effective way of teaching. But when we shared the resources, they went, oh my gosh, yes, that was great. So it really depends upon what level you can afford to be at, what level you have the time to be able to put together. I will admit it takes time to put resources together for families to share, to build kits, to think of the ideas. to have the staff brainstorm and give you ideas, but yet it's very, very efficient in helping families learn. So how do you support that learning at home? Here are some thoughts for directors and administrators, and I'm not going to read those to you. I'm going to let you kind of read those on your own. We're getting down to just a few minutes left. We will share with you the slides from the session, and we will make a one-page handout to also include with it. So if you're a director, administrator, you'll get this list in front of you. Family engagement starts from the bottom of an organization. It starts with the families, but it really starts from the top, expecting that family engagement will be a part of what is accomplished in your program. On the right is something I call the communication box. One time wanting to encourage staff to go a little bit deeper in doing connections with families, we took a pizza box donated by a pizzeria in the community, and we put together a box that had stamps and postcards, etc. Every teacher, knowing that they have 2 stamps per child that they can use during the year to send out a message to the family, empowers them to be able to do that messaging. But that's something that comes from the top, to have each teacher walk to the office and say, can I have a stamp? Can I have a stamp? That just isn't as efficient. But equipping them and laying the expectation from the administrative level of, we want you to communicate with your families, and giving them a resource to work with helps them as much as it does helping us to empower families by giving them resources. Parent or partner, what was the difference? You are. You are the difference. There are positives and there are challenges in working with families, but 50 years of research began by Ann Henderson shows that when families are involved, children do better in school and schools do better. We're talking about all social economic statuses. We're talking about all kinds of communities. Engaging families, though, requires being intentional and purposeful, and that effort comes from you. Building on family strengths and inviting them to be partners with you raises the potential that their student will be successful. So Vicki, I was going to ask you to share a couple of ideas. Can you pick some of your favorites of things that have been shared with us?
Oh gosh, let's see, we go back, hold on just a second. I think as Liliana said, hold on, I missed that one. I apologize. Class tags, Facebook, child plus text messages. We have some other folks that use the creative kids and teaching strategies. Some of the interesting ideas, I had to go just a little further up, I apologize. Home visits, text messages, lending libraries. We have a couple of lending libraries. We greet parents when they pick up their kids. We use Dojo. So a lot of interactive tools here.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. Give me one moment. Took a stuffed animal, Pete, the cat, home and described what he did all week, took pictures and shared. And we have home volunteer sheets with different school readiness skills they can do at home. We also use learning links.
Awesome.
And I think that's about all we have.
We will pull those letters together, and as I said, we'll take those suggestions and share them out with you. One idea I learned at a program that I was doing in Chicago, someone said, oh, we put stickers on the books. And I go, a sticker? And she's talking about a round disc sticker, and they put it over the edge of the book. And I said, why'd you do that? And she said, well, that way when we sent it home, we know that the family has opened it. And if it's not been torn open, we know we need to sit down and read that book with that child that they haven't had that opportunity. So beautiful ideas come from the field. If you have other suggestions later that you think of, please do send them off to us. Here's the contact information if Vicki and I can be of help. Vicki and I were brainstorming earlier. This is year 2 of doing webinars. Last year we did several, and she will share out information afterwards as to the handouts, the PowerPoint slides, but she'll also share with you what some of those other webinars have been, if any of those are of interest. And please, if what we've shared today, if even just clips of it would be helpful for your staff to brainstorm, we welcome you to use the address that she gives you to be able to go back and to check out and look at something again, if that would be helpful. Thank you so much for your time and for your belief that parents can be our partners, because otherwise I know you wouldn't have been with us this hour. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good seeing you again, Bev.
Yes. What are you doing, Tina?
I'm still with Learning Grove, which is a Children Inc. program.
Okay.
Right now I'm supervising in-school preschools and what was Treasure House. It's now called River Center.
In that
And-
flat piece of ground.
And today I took on a new role of working with Early Head Start. So
Wow.
staying busy.
You are. Well, we trained you well.
Yeah. I still see Wanda every once in a while. So, but
I
yeah.
have a message to Martha to follow up, and I have not done that, so I need to do that.